the only show focused on stars' improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hey everyone, welcome to season 2 of Rising Stars. We're doing something special today. We're filming this live, so thanks to our studio audience for joining us for the first time. We typically record these and then publish the recording a bit later, but today our topic is really hot off the press, and we wanted to get this conversation out there without any delay. Quick housekeeping to the people that are joining us live. There is chat functionality, so feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll address those as we can. So back up, episode 10 of season 1, we had a couple of really, really bright guests. Jessica Assefa, Chief Quality Officer at Israel Health Plans, and David Dodge, Director of Medicare Operations and Stars at Cambia Health Solutions. We talked about Plan Preview 2. It had come out. We were addressing the kind of all the interesting elements of the cut point changes. And as part of that conversation, we looked ahead at the upcoming 2023 star ratings release. That's where we are today, right? 2023 stars came out last week. Still hot off the press. Still being digested. I see kind of new nuggets on LinkedIn every day on something new that someone kind of discovers in there. So we wanted to make today's conversation focus on that. So let's get to it. I'm going to bring back on Mick Toomey, our co-host and CEO of Hyperlift, our sponsor. Mick, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
And then our guests, returning guests from episode 10 of season 1. That sounds so legit when we say that, right? Jessica Assefa and David Dodge. So thanks for being back with us.
Yeah, happy to be back.
Likewise.
So I'll kick us off here, right? So one of the things that popped out at me as soon as 2023 stars came out, the fact sheet and digging into the data, was the percentage of contracts that are 4+ stars. Historically 49-50%. Last year, definitely an anomaly with all the better of, jumped up to almost 70%. This year we thought, I definitely thought it's going to be, down closer to 50 than 70. And it was 51 again. So 51%. So I guess, did that match your expectations and as far as the percentage of plans that achieve 4? Jessica?
For me, it was a little bit above what I expected as well. I kind of expected more of that return to baseline, looking at some of those, looking to match parallel with some of those statistics we saw in 2021. And it wasn't quite as scary, quite as ugly as we thought, but still larger declines than we've seen in years. I mean, they don't begin to match the enormity of the increases we saw last year, but definitely bigger declines than I've ever seen in the star ratings.
And I think that, I think the plans in the 4-star range kind of came back, right, to about what we expected. I was frankly surprised at the number of 5-star plans that still existed this time. I think we all expected a bit more of a drop from the 74 down to probably closer to that 20-ish range to be in line. So that was a tad surprising.
Yeah. That, in my mind, Mick, is there's this sort of breakaway theme, right, as we're all sort of going through and digesting the data. And it's the way that the 5-star plans have really just kind of separated from the rest of the group. There's greater proportion of 5-star plans than we've seen in the past. A lot of familiar names, right, that all of us who pay pretty close attention to stars have seen before. But it's a larger group than what we've seen previously. And that was something that caught my eye as well. I think that's also something that's driving a lot of the cut point growth, where we're seeing cut point growth.
Well, I think you hit on something interesting there, where you said that kind of breakaway, right? Again, we're always looking at reward factor thresholds, things like that. When you're looking to optimize, right? And if you look historically, there have been kind of a 10-15 basis point range for the means for the 65 and 85s. And we obviously saw a big jump last year for stars 2022. We were expecting it all to come back down to kind of more of a normal range this time. And most of them did, right? But the 85% mean threshold for reward factor without QI stayed pretty high, much higher than it's ever been outside of STARS 2022. So that supports that theory that you've got around them really kind of spreading the gap between kind of the haves and the have-nots in terms of the 5 stars are really starting to differentiate that score.
Yeah. Speaking of the have-nots, I was just shocked to see how many contracts dropped below the 3-star level this year. That's something I didn't expect to see. I think there was a total of, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have the fact sheet in front of me, but 41, I want to say, contracts, right? Yeah, that dropped below 3 stars, which is huge. I looked back just to 2020, and I've never seen more than 5 or 6 with an overall rating below 3 stars. So that's enormous, and especially in the wake of the recent final rule from CMS, that says if any contract drops below 3 stars at the overall Part C summary or Part D summary, or any combination of the 3 for 2 years in a row, will be disallowed to expand any contracts under that legal entity or open new contracts. And I think that's going to be huge in an era like now, where all these MA contracts, a good number of them are about expansion and growth. So it'll be interesting.
And the point you bring up about, I think the point that you bring up about any contract in that legal entity is really impactful for some of those larger national organizations where you have a whole lot of contracts, within one legal entity. And if these are dropping off, what kind of an impact does that have on you much more broadly than just one contract?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And I was in that same bucket. I was really surprised at the number of those contracts that are SNPs was just disproportionately high. Of those 41, it looked like 31 of those below 3-star contracts were SNP plans, which was just huge. And it's not because SNP plans, there were more SNP plans in the mix. It was a pretty even mix between rated plans, SNPs and non-SNPs. So that was shocking that only, of that 41, only 10 are non-SNP plans. So it makes you wonder if the CAI adjustment, the capped case mix adjustment, if some of these methodologies, they, just like the star ratings program, they probably weren't designed to take COVID type impacts into effect in their efforts to level the playing ground between SNPs and non-SNPs. And we'd have to look into it more, but I'm wondering if we're seeing some of that play out in this disparity.
That's where my head goes is the COVID impact on the SNP members, and that that makes sense to me intuitively, right? That they would have more social risk factors, more transportation insecurities, more, all kinds of insecurities that would make it harder for them to access care. I think we know that intuitively, and I think it seems to be playing out, in these kind of the tail end of the COVID impact, where disaster relief goes away, and all of a sudden it's like we've squeezed the balloon in the middle, right? Like last year, everyone was kind of 4 and 4.5, and now there are fewer 4-star plans, fewer 3.5-star plans. I think fewer 4.5-star plans, but still 57 5-star plans and 41 2.5 and 2-star plans. So it literally it feels like we're creating separation, and I don't want to say it's because the disaster relief going away. Like that's not the reason in my head, right? That was a gift last year. I say a gift. It was needed to, for many plans at least, to kind of overcome the impact of the disaster that we were under, the pandemic. But now, I don't think it's just that going away that's creating the separation, right? There are just inherent challenges. Well, I think there's some inherent challenges with COVID, but I wonder too, like, are plans just getting distracted and taking their eye off the ball? Did last year's relief give them a sense of, kind of lull them to sleep a little bit, and make them think they don't have to do as much? Or I don't want to think that. If I'm sitting in a plan's shoes, like I would never think that. But how do you attribute this huge separation that exists today?
It's possible. Go ahead, David. I've been verbose. Your turn.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of the hypotheses, Rex, that you put forward. I think that we all acknowledge, right, that the special needs plan population is just more challenging to work with. What I would imagine is happening, or will be happening here, is I mentioned that for plans that have multiple contracts, it's all about being tight, right? It's one of those things where it's not necessarily about maintaining 5 stars unless you've really figured out what to do with it. Instead, it's bringing your plans in closer, so that you're sort of avoiding some of the risks that Jessica, I think, highlighted really well. Some of those risks of 2 years, sub 3 stars, right? At the same time, I think that plans that are looking at expansion into additional contract types, right? If you're typically a PPO or an HMO plan, something like that, I think when we look at these results, you may have hesitation in terms of pursuing that special needs plan. Certainly within the same legal entity, you may have hesitation in terms of pursuing that Part D standalone plan because of the risks associated with running for 2 years in a row at sub 3 stars and the implications that could portend. And so the thing I'm thinking about is keep it tight, right? It's one of those things where plans that can really do something with a 5-star rating have probably been accustomed to 5-star ratings in the past. Last year, it was something that was relatively easier for plans to reach. I think that going forward, it's going to remain difficult, but there's more protecting against downside risk in the same way that we've thought about, maintain that 4-star rating in the past, especially with the quality bonus payment and how challenging it can make in terms of producing subsequent bids. I think now when we think about our expansion hopes, whatever it is that we're looking to do that we may be forbidden from doing, if we have that 2-year history on one of our contracts, I think that's going to spell kind of a somewhat different game type 2 strategy. And this is beyond just the stars leaders in your organization, but it's going to take those stars leaders and the product leaders really working together to make sure that you're maintaining stars in service of the product.
I wonder too, if some of that, I'm just thinking as we're all talking, if so, that same COVID relief that masked some decline in performance for stars, this also could have delayed the effects that we're going to feel from that 2-year runway from having below 2 stars,
Sure.
because everyone performed so well last year. There was very few contracts, even with a C or D summary, right, below 2 stars. And this year, 25 that were 3 stars overall, but had a C or D summary rating below 3 stars, in addition to the 41 that had their overall. And all these folks have strike 1, right? So I'm wondering next year, in this next coming star year, we're really going to see that compounded. And that might be what we're all sitting talking about, when we do season 2, episode 1, right? Or season 3.
I think season 3. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think you hit on some interesting things there, because I do think that there's a bit of a delayed effect. When we look at plans, there are some that achieved new levels of ratings in stars 22, right? Really benefited from the better of methodology. But, a lot of our customers did not take much advantage of the better of. And I think that, to your point, Rex, does contribute a little bit to that disparity in ratings that we're seeing now when that's going away, because those plans that really kind of kept on it are still going to be up there. Those that really took advantage of better of, I think that goes to Jessica's point about kind of a delayed effect. If you relied too heavily on that, it's now coming to light. And frankly, all of this, no matter who you are, next year we're going to have Tukey. And I think that there's still a lot of lack of detailed understanding of what Tukey's going to do to your contract. Seeing the impact there, and if you have some of that delayed impact that you're talking about, Jessica, then when you combine that with the impacts of Tukey, I think that, to your point, the call this time next year is going to be really interesting and kind of shocking.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think, the taking advantage of the better of last year, for the plans that did that a lot, they had those measures removed from their improvement measure eligibility, right, this year calculation. And that those improvement measures, that's another thing that jumped out at me was the national average star for the improvement measures fell tremendously, more than any other measure. So Part C, they both fell. So they both fell from around. Well, so Part C, I have it right here. Part C fell from from 3.7, or the health plan QI measure fell from a national average of 3.7 last year to 2.6 this year. So over a star, down in the 2.5-star range. Part D, so the drug plan QI fell from 4.2 down to 2.7. So, and again, down in the 2.5-star range. And I mean, I can't help but wonder, and I haven't done all the analysis yet, but did the plans that benefited from Better Of, they got the lift, but not only did they get a lift, but they got a kick down. They got kind of knocked down this year because they got the lift last year, because their improvement measure probably underperformed because those measures were taken out. I don't know that for a fact, but intuitively that's where my head is. But you guys is that what you think? Do you have a reaction to that? Or other thoughts?
I think those two improvement measures are entirely in the eye of the beholder, right? Because we've had experience in the past where you're kind of right on the edge as a 3.5-star plan, and then improvement itself, right? You get a couple 5-star improvement measures, and my goodness, what that can do to sort of get you over the line into a 4-star rating. That said, though, the two most uncorrelated measures to a plan's overall rating, I was looking at this last night, are health plan improvement and drug plan improvement. And it's one of those things where it just doesn't have much bearing to the 5-star organization in terms of, the impact of those measures. Next would be reducing the risk of falling, right? And we're back to a pretty well-established debate in terms of what validity is there in those health outcome survey measures. I really do applaud what CMS is up to in terms of trying to add more signal and remove the noise from those HOS measures. But yeah, health plan and drug plan quality improvement were the least correlated with overall plan rating, followed by reducing the risk of falling, and then I think monitoring physical activity.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, I was surprised even, on a slightly related topic, just to even see the drops. I didn't expect that in those two HOS measures and falls and bladder. And it just kind of brings my head back to this SNP underperformance. I'd like to go back and just look of all these SNP plans that dropped so much more than expected this year. How many of them, the SNPs are usually the plans that perform disproportionately higher in some of those HOS measures. And I wonder if during COVID, if increased frailty and increased health issues during COVID maybe led to some decline in those measures for the SNPs and brought the overall down with it.
And maybe access to care challenges, because some of those HOS measures are dependent upon having the conversation with your doctor, right?
True.
And them giving you guidance around falls prevention or increasing activity, et cetera. So if they weren't able to see their doctor, and maybe they didn't have as good of access to telehealth or the abilities to have those telehealth visits that maybe the non-SNP members were able to have, that could create some disparity, I would think too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the importance of making sure, these D-SNP members have access, right? Like, and if they can't do it in person, then we have to equip them with the technology to do it virtually, or these measures and a lot of other measures are going to tank, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And CMS has provided us a wonderful pathway by which to do that, right? So I can't remember the name of the program itself, but CMS is offering connectivity assistance and technological devices to individuals that are low income. So, and they've sent us all recently, I'm sure we all read the HPMS memo, but it's getting that into the hands of the right folks, right? And breaking that HPMS memo down into simple steps that could be made into member mailers or dropped off at provider offices where we have large numbers of low income individuals that they can get their hands on that, or through care coordination, right?
Definitely, yeah. Hey, back to the so I feel like we've talked about those low performing plans, and a lot of them are SNPs, and I guess there are articles out now, the news continues to come out, but even back to the past performance kind of impacting your ability to expand. I mean, I know, from the national level, I know Centene is, definitely in the news there from they I think they dropped from 45% of members in 4-star plans down to 3%. So, and they have, I think, a host of those sub 3-star plans as well, right?
24.
So clearly, and the only reason I bring them up is because they're so big, and I wonder about them, skewing the data, and making it like. I guess my question is, how much of this is sort of Centene versus the industry? Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. They do of those 41, they do make up over half, right? 24 of those. I think 19 of their contracts were SNPs. And then, but when I look across the other health plans that make up pieces of those below 3-star contracts, there's a few. I think there's Elevance has 4, United had 4 of Elevance, all were SNPs. United, I think 2 were PPO when they had a SNP. And then the other 7 were kind of spread across different health plans, but all the rest of those were SNPs as well. So even though, like you say, we've definitely got, this big national skewing the data, we're seeing kind of that same theme play out among the others that contribute to the other half of that low performance this year.
Jessica, I really appreciate you sharing very familiar names who are in that position, just because I think it's really going to challenge the landscape. We don't run a special needs plan at Cambian, so can't really speak from experience there. But the thing that I'd mention is, it's easy to imagine sort of the tale of two counties aspect of this tied to your special needs plan rating, right? If you're in an ACA capped county, it'd be one of those things where the implications tied to running your special needs plan business may be limited. If you're in a double bonus county, my goodness, it can be a tremendous swing, especially after the 2022 star ratings. And so I mentioned it. We have seen some great studies coming out in terms of kind of map of the U.S. and how plans have fared and how certain states are faring right now. I think there's Jessica, I think you showed the Wakely article by that team there who pays pretty keen attention to what's going on stars. The thing that matters there, though, is, which counties, right? Because that's something that really affects a plan's ability to be competitive in their 2024 bids.
Absolutely. Counties and locations are huge. And you told the tale of North and South, I think in our prior episode here, where just that huge disparity between those rurally located and those with more access. But I think even more so, and just my experience in working with SNPs across the country, I see like the state that SNP is located in making a huge difference in how well that state does in coordinating Medicaid and Medicare services. There are states like Minnesota where they're mostly, they may all be, I don't know, but mostly FIDA SNPs and highly coordinated. And it's a really streamlined process for the member with one card versus multiple, and one person coordinating the care, one person maintaining long-term supports and services, through that elderly waiver, versus, states like Oregon, where we're both in right now, David, where it's super, super fragmented, right? Medicare and Medicaid are kind of doing their own thing, and you have multiple players all hitting the member with the same asks from different directions.
Yeah, I mean, it presents an opportunity, right? It presents an amazing opportunity in terms of kind of joining forces. One of the things I really enjoy about quality work generally is there's really not competition, right? We're serving the same community, kind of a thing. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in terms of sort of following those states. And Minnesota jumps out. I know up in the Northeast, we've got sort of similar characteristics about different stakeholders banding together in the name of the community. And I think that that's going to be something that will become increasingly crucial for the sake of just, operating these businesses successfully.
Definitely. Coordinating care is huge.
Yeah. Hey, we've one of the other things that was in the fact sheet that was interesting that I want to spend a minute on is because Jessica, you mentioned some of the plans that specifically, right, and like the Uniteds and Elevance and plans like that. So that makes me think about the for-profit versus non-profit, right? And this was a pretty interesting, I thought, bullet in the or paragraph in the fact sheet that hasn't always been in there. I think they started putting in there the last couple of years, right? But to show the the variance between for-profit plans and nonprofit plans. And the stat this year is that 72% of nonprofits are 4 stars or higher. 43% of for-profits are 4 stars or higher. So, I mean, almost a 30-point difference. And I guess where my head goes there is sort of the objective of kind of doing this work, right? And if you're, and I'm totally assuming, and I'm I'm totally, every for-profit plan is going to go, you're totally projecting that on us. Like that's not how we behave. That's not how we talk in meetings. And I totally get that. We work with, plenty of for-profit plans and nonprofit plans. And I'm not saying that for-profit plans are inherently, evil and just in it for profit. But when there is that stake and there are shareholders and there is the objective, at least on Wall Street, to make profit. I mean, it feels like it feels like it does exist, right? Like that, or at least it creates a variance. It creates, maybe it makes it more difficult. Maybe the message doesn't resonate with as many of your stakeholders as if you were a nonprofit entity. Whatever it is, I mean, I think it's clearly showing up in results. 30% more nonprofit plans achieve 4 stars or higher than for-profit plans. And I guess, one of the takeaways for me is the importance, at least in stars, right, for the stars leader in those organizations to make sure that's not the objective that is kind of present in the star steering committee. And like our objective is to, maybe it's to make quality, to earn quality bonus payments so we can invest back into benefits and make our members have, better care and we can grow. That, I think that's okay. But I think there is that challenge for a stars leader to make sure at a for-profit company that is not our objective here, right? Or we're not going to succeed.
Yeah, it is an objective, right? It's a cost containment, is a leg of the stool, right? Of the three-legged stool. But I think I hear what you're saying, Rex, and I think maybe for a stars leader, taking that a step beyond what you said, making sure that you're connecting the dots for all those entities, right? And you're showing clearly how investment in quality, investment in experience, investment in people's health reduces, MLR, improves star ratings, leads to increased finance, right? That you can hope will do the right thing with moving forward, but just kind of connecting all those puzzle pieces for folks.
Yeah, Rex, do you recall, I think that you mentioned this has happened in this year's announcement. Was it featured last year? Do you recall that sort of distribution?
Yeah, it was more like, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was the for-profit this year, 43%. Last year was something like 66%. I think it was in the mid-60s, I think. So it was definitely higher. And I wonder about, again, like the Centene impact on that because of the big drop they've had. Maybe, I think CVS, had a sizable drop in their 4-star plans as well, right? So clearly there was some impact on that, but still, I believe there's even historically maybe at least a 10-point difference, if not
Interesting.
30, right?
Yeah, I think that the reason why that arose in terms of sort of examining things from that perspective was just congressional interest into the role of private equity in healthcare, right? We've seen a noted increase in that congressional interest just over the last maybe couple of years, something along those lines. And so I appreciate seeing things in that fashion. At the same time, I'm going to data geek on this one and would love to control for other features, right? Would love to control for state of the quality movement within a given service area where the plan's working, age of that contract. I think that we've got to pay attention to just the sheer quantity of MAPD and Part D standalone contracts that we have today, because that's something that could be sort of driving the story there. I think gone are the days when it used to be the case where longevity was such a key indicator of success in star ratings. I think that somebody can come on and in their first year of receiving a rating can achieve a 4+ star rating. But I agree with where Jessica's coming from. I can tell you that within the walls of the not-for-profit where I sit, the goal is achieving on stars, demonstrating, customer service. Who wouldn't want to be 5 stars on customer service, right? The other one, the measure that I saw that was most correlated with overall rating of healthcare quality. Talk about a succinct summary measure in terms of an overall rating. And I appreciate that. And we can wring our hands, and surely we will, on the fact that it's subjective assessments of rating of healthcare quality. And there's a bunch of
from the CAPS survey of all measures, right? Something from the CAPS survey is the most highly correlated with high performing plans.
But then, of course, part of that too is it counts more than it used to, right? And so it can determine the overall result just because CAPS measures are quadruple rated, but it comes down to that. And so I think the doing good for the population that we serve, right? These are seniors, these are the disabled, who wouldn't want to go down that path? And then thinking of the quality bonus payment as an option to do more good through growth, the quality bonus payment as an opportunity to really dig into supplemental benefits, especially the sustainable kind that resonates with members. And I think that we're all going through trying to figure out exactly what that means. And then the really fun bit, Jessica, I'm sure you can share with this, is removing barriers. That work is a blast, right? That's one of the most meaningful aspects of the work that we all get an opportunity to do, no matter really kind of where you sit. I feel in an MA plan, don't necessarily have to be a stars lead, and the opportunities are there. As we talked about in the last episode, and I think Jessica and I both kind of related to this notion of value-based care is picking right back up again in urban areas, but we're not seeing that from a rural perspective. And so then that's leading to, I think, really meaningful work along the lines of service access for people who've retired or who've always lived in rural areas.
Yeah, and to your point too, Rex, just going back to making sure that we're communicating this up to leadership and to folks that make the financial decisions within our organization and connecting those dots. Sometimes, and it can happen in any health plan, but in a for-profit too, there's when we lose quality bonus dollars, when we lose rebate dollars, there's this knee-jerk reaction to cut costs where we can, right? And sometimes we make decisions by cutting, new member newsletters and services and things like this, services maybe that we were able to put into place because of those QBP dollars, with the 2022 star ratings being so advantageous, and being really careful that leadership understands the downstream impact of pulling those things back that members have come to see as benefits, or that help us connect to our members in a meaningful way.
Definitely, yeah. And kind of related to all of that, and Dave, what you said earlier too about kind of gone are the days that even new plans, right, like don't achieve 4+ stars. Like I know we had cases this year where, like I know Devoted showed up on the list of high performing plans, right, or the high performing icon, where they had a 5-star plan that they got its first ever rating. That's not common, right? But and I think you talked about this even in episode 10, right, where things are changing and new plans are maybe climbing the learning curve a little bit more quickly than before, or at least some of them.
Well, we better shout out to attendee. We saw him announce himself in the chat, Josh Edwards, who's over there at Devoted. That's a pretty impressive feat in terms of what they've been up to there. And so, I mean, it's an ever-changing dynamic, right? And right now we see just a ton of plans out there. We're seeing the breakaway. I feel like as a group, we sort of identified those two themes. There's the 5-star breaking away, and then there's the sub 3-star kind of breaking away, right? And then Mick can't help but bring back the way in which, Tukey's going to throw that all into disarray as well, right? Don't count on anything from these results just because that'll be redistributive, right? In terms of the impacts of Tukey. And so eager to see, Mick, what your team is putting together around, impacts of Tukey. Also eager to see any simulated results from CMS, just so that we can understand how these results that we just received last week would have played out were Tukey in place.
Yeah, we're putting that analysis together on our side, not knowing when CMS is going to release theirs. Going back to something you said earlier, David, about the QI measures being the least correlated, to a degree, that makes sense to me, right? Because if you think about the 5-star measure, anywhere up the 4.5, 5 star, it's really hard to continue to improve at levels with all the measures to get you up to 5 stars, right? But if you're down in the 2.5, 3 star, you do have more of a shotgun approach where you can generate bigger gains across the board. And so to me, there's a bit of logic that just says you are more likely to have higher QI scores if you're on the lower end than the higher end. Does that resonate with you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think too, and to your David and Mick, to both of your points, with Tukey coming on, I think it's so important. I think most health plans are used to either kind of doing this guesswork and projecting cut points, like, okay, we'll just bump it up a couple points for cushion, or using prior year cut points because there's usually not that big of a difference. I think it's more important than ever that we have an accurate measure stick for our progress this year, that we're measuring against cut points with mean resampling, with the Tukey methodology, with these things incorporated into our cut point projections, or we're going to be caught flat-footed in STAR year 2024.
I think you're absolutely right. And actually, we should take this opportunity to say this again out loud. Because I think that there's a lot of belief that the guardrails are going to protect everybody, and we're not going to see the big moves. And, we've talked to a lot of really smart people out there, and the biggest misunderstanding that we've seen is that the guardrails, the 5% is going to be attached to the actual STARS 2023 cut points. And that's not the case, right? Like you pointed out, Rex, about the mean resampling in the STARS 2022, the cut points are going, the basis for those guardrails are going to be the STARS 2023 cut points with Tukey applied. And so that's going to be a very different number. So for those plans that are thinking, all right, not going to go up more than 5 points from STARS 2023, that could be a bit of a rude awakening and something that they're going to want to focus on.
Absolutely. I think Mick had to explain that to me 3 times. By the 3rd time I got it, and I threw up in my mouth a little bit. It was really...
And she didn't even believe me.
I know. I had to go look it up myself.
Like, all right, you're right.
She had to go find that one sentence in the final rule from 3 years ago.
I want to believe you, but this is hard.
Yeah.
I'm a believer. I'm there.
So one more question, and then I want to allow you to think about if we haven't talked about something that we should have, and we'll kind of do a wrap here in a second. But one thing we didn't spend much time on that I want to at least, and David, this is probably more to you, but Jessica and Mick, if you have insights here too. But I know David has talked about this over the last few days. But the 5-star plans, we have a lot more than I thought we would have at 57. Right? I thought we'd be down closer to 20. I thought most of the people that got it last year that have never gotten it before, I thought most of them would lose it and fall back to 4.5 at least. But we still have 57 plans that are 5-star plans. And again, we're seeing some new plans like Devoted. We're seeing some mature plans that are just, have worked really, really hard. And, Cigna has a huge contract that's 5 stars for the first time. Blue Cross Tennessee has their biggest contract is 5 stars for the first time. Lots of hard work over years and years. Select Health, a couple of years in a row now at 5 stars. So like we're familiar with some of these 5-star plans, but there are a lot more than I expected. And I'm curious about, so we don't have the COVID relief, we don't have the disaster relief from COVID, but we have some disaster relief from the Texas winter storm, which I was part of, by the way, and Mick, you were too, I think, right? A few days of no electricity, so I completely understand the lack of access for a few days there that disrupted a lot of seniors. But then Hurricane Ida too. So, there's a few states that are impacted by Hurricane Ida. So those plans that are impacted, I know, got disaster relief for virtually all measures, just like everyone did last year for COVID. But do you have a feel for how many of these 5-star plans got 5 stars because of that disaster relief from those 2 events? I don't know if you know that yet, or that's something, we can continue to dig into, but it's definitely top.
Yeah, I mean, I was taking a look at the data tables that I think probably everybody on this call, everybody watching this video takes a look at as well. And when you look at that summary tab, you can see this. And so if you filter on 5-star rating, you can see who met the percentage threshold in terms of 2021 experience to get that. Recalling from memory, it was maybe 4 or 5 of those plans, right? And so, 10% or less, right, who received it. And so it's not a theme, it's more of the exception this year as we've got our first year of what's starting to feel like new normal. Can't claim back to normal, but of what's starting to feel like new normal. And then, of course, what is it? It's October 11th today, but then we've had the hurricane as well, just, tear through Florida and then make its way up the eastern seaboard. And so then that's going to be something, of course, that's going to be having an effect next year.
For sure, yeah.
I know with more MA plans reporting a rating this year than ever, and more 5-star plans this year, in voluntary disenrollment at churn is just at an all-time high. I mean, it's just hard to fit all this conversation into 30 minutes, and it's hard to know where to focus. Which fire is most vital to put out for your organization is something we'll all have to decide for ourselves.
Yeah, and we've had in season 1, we probably touched on disenrollment in a couple of episodes, right? And had some pretty, I feel like, compelling discussion around and sort of breaking down the fact that there's no barrier to switching now, right? Everyone's got access to, I think the average Medicare beneficiary has access to 36 plans or something like that in their zip code, right? And most everyone in 2022 had access to a 5-star plan. They could switch to in the middle of the year if they wanted to, right? So just no barriers, less loyalty. So yeah, I mean, Jessica, it's something we've seen a lot of plans struggle with is, disenrollment. We've had conversations about satisfaction doesn't equal loyalty, right? Like you can have really satisfied members, but if a competitor comes in with one really shiny, object in their supplemental benefits, you're going to lose some people. It doesn't matter how satisfied they are, right? So understanding those risks, like it's a huge, it needs to be a huge topic in every Medicare Advantage organization for sure.
Rex, speaking of supplemental benefits, I was in disenrollment. I was just reading an article by Deft Research, a little blurb. And that was one of, for the prior year, that was one of the key drivers of disenrollment was poor experience with supplemental benefits, poorly implemented supplemental benefits, and poor experience. And in the article of Def Research, they said they've never seen that make the top list of reasons folks were switching Medicare Advantage plans. And I thought that was so interesting and so spoke to the need for strong vendor oversight. And
vendor management has never been more important. Totally agree.
Yeah, I just think of internal tracking and the way that our CTM dashboards have evolved with the introduction of more supplemental benefits, right? And then you can just think of those benefits that you have in place that are solid and are delivering that promise of value, and then those that aren't. And I'd say, we're in a position right now where it really behooves all plans to sort of figure out where do you find that fit in terms of what members pride themselves on, at the same time staying in touch with innovations there, because my goodness, things are changing quickly, right? And so it's an exciting time, but at the same time always a challenging, right? It's not just positive emotions. There's a sense of a lot's coming. And Mick, I keep looking at you as I think about Tukey. So I can say I've been fairly warned. Thank you, Mick.
Right. There you go.
Okay, is any we've gone way over our 35-minute typical episode here, but anything we did not talk about that we should have that you guys want to bring up real quick?
Not unless you have another hour.
Okay, then we'll end it here, knowing there's a lot more to talk about. But yeah, I'm sure we'll find more opportunities. So yeah, with that, so hey, Jessica, David, thanks for joining us again. It's been fun having repeat guests over, at the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2. I feel like this is a great start to season 2. So yeah, thanks for all of our virtual attendees. We don't have any questions, I don't think, right? I was kind of watching and I see a lot of chat, but I don't see any questions. So thanks for being engaged though. And yeah, I appreciate your time. So we will talk next time. Thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you.